Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
Thank you, Chris. Good morning, everybody. My name is Conway, and I'm an alcoholic. I'm also a physician, licensed to practice medicine and surgery in the state of Georgia. I'm married and the father of 5 wonderful children. And this is always the way that I like to start my talk. And if you will notice, the most important thing in my life, I said first, that I am an alcoholic. This is the way that I live my life. My disease of alcoholism comes before my home, it comes before my job, it comes before my family. Because I know that any time that I should ever forget that I'm an alcoholic, I would probably go back to what I was. I was the loneliest, the sickest, the sorriest, most miserable, frightened human being that you can imagine. But today, thanks to the love, the mercy of a kind and a forgiving God, the strength and the hope and love from people just like you, and the living program of Alcoholics Anonymous, I don't have to be ashamed of me anymore. I don't have to run, and I don't have to hide, and I don't have to lie, and I don't have to cheat. And this is the way I live my life today. And I live a life of joy, and I live a life of happiness. The joy of sobriety that one can only really find by living and practicing the principles of the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, or what I like to refer to as the rhythm of recovery. The rhythm of recovery. And that's what I'd like to talk about a little bit this morning, is the happiness, the joy of sobriety, the rhythm of recovery, and the love of you wonderful people. Before I get started into the story, though, I do want to remember my manners, since I was referred to as a Southern gentleman. And I want to thank Bob and Kim and Chris, the other members of the committee, for putting on a fantastic conference. Let's give them all a big hand. Are you having fun? Yes. Great. I am too. And it's wonderful. And I'll never forget this experience of mine out here in the desert. And there's some things that I would like to talk about. Maybe we'll, as we go a little bit further along. But when I first drove in, and it was just so that the clouds were over the hills here, the mountains, and there was the sun was coming through, and the rays were breaking through the clouds. And I looked up, and I looked into that, and I remember so well, as the psalmist was to say, I lifted up mine eyes unto the hills, from whence cometh my strength. The power of the universe is so awesome and so present. The power of the love of God is so present here in this room this morning. I only have one thing to give you, and that's the sum total of my life's experiences. What I used to be like, what happened, and what it's like today. Because that's all that I am. So for the next few minutes, I want to share with you my experience, my strength, and my hope. I was born in Atlanta, Georgia. I lived there for a good part of my life, and it was a very happy family. My father was a doctor, my mother was a teacher. I had an older sister, and I had a very happy childhood up until about the age of 12. Somewhere along about the age of 12 was when I first realized I was different from other people. I was different from you. I don't know how to explain this. Perhaps as a child might feel as he came into a room full of adults. Or you could be like you were a while ago or last night. We could all be in this room and you'd be laughing and talking and having a good time, and I came in and I didn't belong. Something was missing in me. I wasn't complete. I wasn't a whole person. And that's when I began my search to try to find the place where I belonged, a place where I was needed, and a place where I was loved. I took my first drink, though, when I was about 7 years old. Now, that isn't a normal, ordinary custom but it was a specific reason. I had the whooping cough. And whooping cough was a real serious illness. A lot of people died from the whooping cough, and I had the whooping cough. And nothing would stop these spasms of cough. And I remember real well, one night I ran down the hall, I grabbed my daddy around his legs, and I stood there, and my little body was racking in these spasms of cough. And he took me into the bathroom, and he stood me up on the sink, and he poured out about that much alcohol, and he gave it to me, and immediately the coughing stopped. You see, my very first experience with alcohol, it solved a need, it gave me relief, and it stopped the cough. And I think that's interesting. I don't think it's got a thing in the world to do with me being an alcoholic, but it's interesting. What's significant about it, though, is the fact that I remember it so well. This is something that happened 53 years ago. 53 and 7, 60, if anybody's having any trouble. But I remember it just like how often we hear somebody describe their talk and they're going in and they tell you about their very first drink, where they were, who they were with, what they did before, what they did afterwards, what it was, how much it cost, everything about it. You know, you don't remember your first root beer. It is a significant event in our lives, those of us that have this condition, when we're first united with this magic elixir that's so to change our lives. Well, I didn't drink anymore for a while, but I still remembered it. I went on, I did real well. I was an overachiever. My mother, being a teacher, spent a lot of time with me, and she taught me how to study and how to concentrate and how to get the most out of a little bit of time. So this enabled me to go a long ways. She also became quite ill during my early childhood and died right at my beginning of my teens. And this was a tremendous loss to me. My father was a doctor and gone from home most of the time. My sister's considerably older, and so I was very close to my mother. And when she died, then I felt alone and continued to be different. Alone and different. And this is the way that I lived most of my life. This is the way that I lived my life until I found the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, or you found me, or whatever it was. But anyhow, I did real well. I was an overachiever. I was usually at the top of the class, made good grades, all those sort of things. And there was no drinking in high school. Maybe there's a little teenage show-off type drinking and nothing to be concerned about. And then I went on and went to college. And then in college, I met the most beautiful girl in the world. She was the prettiest thing that you've ever seen. She had real dark skin and real black hair, and her eyes were real dark. They were so dark that you couldn't even see the pupils. And we fell in love, and it was a storybook romance. And after a while, we got married, and we had 2 children. Then she, too, contracted a chronic and a progressive illness, and first she went insane, and then she died. Another great loss, another great tragedy. I cannot say that this was a cause of my alcoholism, and neither do I mean to think to or imply that But I certainly began to drink more and more. By now I'd entered into medical school, and I had accomplished one of the goals that I'd set out to accomplish. And I think that this is significant. And I began to drink more and more and more. And as a result of that, my grades dropped from the top of the class down to the bottom of the class, because alcohol was the most important thing in my life. I finally did graduate from medical school, and then I went to serve my internship and training at the city hospital. Now, the big city hospital in Atlanta is called Grady Hospital, and if there are any of you been to Atlanta, I know you'll remember the Gradys, as we called them. But the old Grady Hospital, they've got a new Grady Hospital now, but the new Grady Hospital is an old Grady Hospital. I'm talking about the old Grady Hospital. But here I finished medical school on June the 30th, and July the 1st they turned us loose on the people, and I'm a doctor. And I remember going to work that morning, and I'll tell you, it was just like being shot out of a gun. My life has never been... This was early wartime, and there was a tremendous shortage of everything, including doctors, and we only had 4 interns for that entire hospital, and it was a large city hospital. And as a result of that, we really worked. We worked 36 hours on and 12 hours off. And the time we worked, it was bookety the whole time. You know, operating room to the emergency room to ride in the ambulance, back to the ambulance to the delivery room to go set a bone in the orthopedic clinic. And I loved it. I loved it. You see, for the very first time in my life, I'm providing a service to mankind. Now, I wasn't much, but I was all they had, and they appreciated it. Also, when this 12 hours off came, I was so exhausted, the only thing I was interested in was finding a place to go to sleep. I stopped drinking, or practically stopped drinking. And I tell you this because I think it's important. I think that this is nothing in the world except a stopgap in my progression to the disease of active alcoholism as we know it today. It takes 2 things to make an alcoholic. One with a condition and alcohol, and you put the 2 together and you get the ism. I stopped drinking. Of course, we know that the process was continuing all during that time. Well, I finished my training there, my internship, and that was a real experience within itself, but we don't have any time to go into that. And then I went into my specialty, and I am a specialist. I'm a ladies' doctor. I never fail to take the opportunity when I'm in the presence of so many beautiful women. I want to thank you because you've been so good to me and my family, and I appreciate it. Oh, it is a wonderful type of work, and it's a very... And for the next 5 years, I was the first assistant to the stork. But that too is really is an awesome experience, and because you're there, you're being present at birth and creation, and you become sort of a member of the family, and you're dealing with normal, healthy, and happy people, and it's a wonderful thing. This life, that when you see new life coming into existence, and I don't do that anymore, and I haven't for quite a few years. And the reason for that is I work in the field of chemical dependency, and I have for over 20 years now. And if you will, I'm present at the rebirth of so many people, and that's even more rewarding. Well, anyhow, I finished my training, I met one of the nurses, and I got married, and then I got drafted. But they don't really draft doctors. They send you a telegram and they say you better. And I knew what the alternative was, so I took them up on their offer, and they sent me out to Fort Sam Houston, Texas. And that's where they send all doctors to make soldiers out of them. But they didn't have any idea of making a soldier out of me or any of the others anyhow. So this was nothing in the world except a 6 weeks vacation with pay. And this pay thing was important because all those years I was there at the city hospital, all we got was $10 a month and all the milk we could drink, and that was it. But now I'm an officer and I'm a gentleman and I have a salary, and my whole world has just turned around. I remember driving out to Fort Sam and significant event, my friends. The shooting wars had all stopped. And everybody was celebrating the victories, and peacetime was here, and Fort Sam's known as a country club of the Army anyhow, and I remember when I pulled up there to Fort Sam, and I went in, and it was just wonderful, and I loved it. The nickel beer and the bingo games and the martini parties, and it was party time all the time. You ever had to wait for Miller time? It was Miller time any time, and you were right. It was a party, and I was right in the middle of it, and I loved it. And I love bands, and I love parades, and I love uniforms, and I'm a real patriot anyhow. And, I cry at parades. I love it. And this is okay. And so I said, I have arrived. This is it. I guess about the best way for me to summarize my military experience, so I cut a lot of this short for you, is I know most of you have seen the motion picture or the television series called MASH. You've seen it? Well, it's all true. Now, don't get me wrong. There are a lot of hard-working, dedicated Army docs, and we worked hard, but we played hard, and we had a lot of fun. Well, I finished my training, and I received orders to go to Orleans, France. Now, I never got to Orleans, France. All my bags and baggage did, but I got all the way to Fort Dix, was issued new orders, sent back down to the Pentagon, and reassigned to Fort Eustis, Virginia, the transportation headquarters of the United States Army. Well, this was wonderful. I wasn't going to have to go anywhere, and I wasn't going to have to be separated from my children and everything. And I can remember driving down through that beautiful tidewater country there up in the Virginias and the Carolinas, and coming into Fort Eustis. And I pulled into the post there, and I stopped. The MP stopped the car and asked me for my orders, and I gave them to them. They went back into the command post, and then they came back out and they lined up, and they gave me a real snappy salute. And I said, "Boy, this is a Class A outfit here." Unknown to me, the reason my orders was changed and I was reassigned to this post, the commanding general's wife was pregnant and expecting a baby. And I was the one responsible for this military emergency. From the moment I drove through those gates, I was the commanding general's wife's doctor. Wherever the commanding general went, commanding general's wife went, the little doctor went along too. We took the yacht out on the James River, commanding general's wife, commanding general's wife's doctor. We took the helicopters to New York, commanding general's wife, commanding general's wife's doctor. Wherever the commanding general and his lady went, the little doctor went too. Sort of like a mascot, That's a real swinging way to spend 2.5 years in the service. But I will tell you, she did finally have a nice baby boy, who I am sure someday will be a commanding general, just like his father and his grandfather. And this will have to go as my contribution to the defense of the United States. I really loved Army life, and anybody with an assignment like that would. And I probably would have stayed, except I wanted to come back and work with my father. My father, my friends, is my hero. And as far as I'm concerned, and he still is, and as far as I'm concerned, it's the greatest mortal man that has ever lived. And certainly the most important one in my life. He was the kindest and the gentlest, the greatest healer and the greatest teacher that I have ever known. First of all, I wanted to be a doctor like my daddy, and then I wanted to come back and work with him, and I did both. But now if you'll get the picture, here I am, a native son, and I've been to school there in the community. My father has a large practice, and I'm welcomed back home literally with open arms. And the members of the medical profession rolled out that red carpet and welcomed me back, and they gave me more assignments and more duties and more positions. And I was on this committee and that committee and on the board of trustees of the County Medical Society and all of this. My first year in practice, you see, and well, by now my ego was about out of sight anyhow, so I thought they were doing about what they should. All except my father. And my father was standing right behind me all the time, looking over my shoulder. Everything that I did, he'd be right there, and I'd turn around real fast, I'd bump into him. I'd go down to the hospital in the middle of the night. I wouldn't be down there 15 minutes before he'd be down there checking up on me. And I resented this. Here I was, a young hero returning from the wars, had the finest training the country ever had to offer, and he didn't trust me. And now my wife started having children. And I resented this. I resented these babies being born, interfering with my life and giving me duty and responsibility and obligations that I wasn't ready to assume. No, I resented these children for being born, and I resented her for having them. I guess I thought she did it all by herself. But you see now what I have done. I have turned away from the only two people that are really close to me. Alcoholics are perfect geniuses of building that wall that we hide behind and hurt the ones that we love and need the most. But at that time, I don't guess I thought I needed anybody. And I really don't think I knew what love was all about. Well, for the next period of time, and to try to shorten this up, I'll be just as candid and honest as I possibly can, that during the next 2 or 3 years is when I enter into the horror part of alcoholism. And I began to drink. First, I didn't drink the nights I was on call. Then I would go out and I would see the other doctors drinking. I say, if it's all right for them, it's all right for me. It is all right for them most of the time. Not that I recommend it, but it is. But you'd go out. The drill was you'd go out and go to have a couple of drinks, go to dinner, then go to either the hospital meeting or the medical society meeting, and then you'd go home. Well, I'd go out and have a couple of drinks. To heck with the meeting in the hospital. Let's go on with the drinking. Alcohol, once again, now is playing the dominant role in my life, and it's the most important factor in my life. There's absolutely no question in my mind that during this period of time, I cross over that invisible but completely irreversible line into the disease of active alcoholism. And once you go across that line, my friends, you never go back the other way. Once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic. Or as one of our friends back home says, once a cucumber becomes a pickle, you never go back to being a cucumber again. And I was well pickled. During this period of time, I did almost every horrible thing that you have ever heard of an alcoholic doing or having happened to. And I'm not proud of that. But I'm not ashamed of the fact that I'm an alcoholic. My children bear scars that will never be erased. But neither are they. I'm not any more ashamed of the fact that I have the disease of alcoholism than I would be if I had diabetes or hypertension or colitis or any one of another 30 or 40 other diseases that I could name there's no apparent cause for. I am not responsible for my illness. I didn't know what was wrong with me. But I am responsible for my recovery. Anybody who was living the life that I was living and doing the things that I was doing, something had to happen to, and it did. Monday morning, October the 1st, 1962, I had a massive heart attack. And I was taken to the hospital. For a while, they didn't know if I was going to live. I certainly didn't know if I would ever be able to work again. I became very depressed and very bitter. And this is where I turned against God. Why did you do this to me? Here I've spent all these years, all this time, all this money now just to be a place I'll be a service to you, to me, to mankind. And you cast me down here in the bed helpless. Not even able to bathe myself. The height of indignity, not being able to bathe yourself. Why did you do this to me? I cursed God. I became consumed with fear, with hate. It's a wonder I didn't kill myself. I left the hospital, though, and I went down to continue my recovery to live with my sister, who had moved from the big city down to a little island off the coast of Georgia called St. Simon's Island. I want to take just a minute or two to tell you about St. Simon's Island because it plays a very important part in my recovery then and now. Now I live on the little island next to it called Sea Island, but it's all the one community. As you drive down, which is the best way to get there, we have these new bridges now that you go up over the inland waterway, and You get up on top of that bridge and you look over, and the first thing that you notice is just the natural beauty that's present there. Trees that you would not believe. These magnificent pine trees that rise straight as an arrow into the sky. They're regal in their nature. They're majestic in their bearing. And the wind blows, and these giant old pines, they will sway and they will creak and they will groan. And underneath the pines are the great live oak. The great live oak, my most favorite of all. The personification of strength and of power and of solidarity. These trees are... Each one of them is a picture story within itself. The boughs are big as many small trees, and they're twisted and they're gnarled, and they'll bend down like that, and sometimes they'll touch the ground and even lift back up. The Spanish moss is in the tops of the trees. And the wind blows and the moss dances, and there's beauty in the wind, and there's music in the air, and there's a certain feeling of peace and serenity there that I have never found anyplace else. Because I know when I am there, I am closer to my God. It is as if this is a hallowed or a sacred place. Well, I stayed down there with her for a little while. I did get better. And I came back to go to work. But you know, anybody who's had any trouble with their heart is not supposed to get nervous. And everybody knows that a heart patient is supposed to get a good night's sleep every night. So I had tranquilizers to keep me calm and sleeping pills to make sure I slept, and I washed it down with a bottle of scotch every night. Now, I don't think they meant for me to do that all at the same time, but this is where I took over, and I started treating me as a doctor. Whenever a doctor starts treating himself as a patient, the patient has got a fool for a doctor. Now, this is where I entered that magic world of living totally by chemistry, and I had a pill for every ill. I mean, I never ever had to worry about drugs. I mean, people talking about drugs, the only thing I had to do was open up a drawer, and I could reach in and get a handful. Red ones and green ones and pink ones and blue ones and speckled ones and yellow ones and uppers and downers, and now they've got those new and tricyclics make you go all three ways. And I took some of all of them, you know. I quickly learned, though, don't fool with them unless they had a warning label on. Warning, maybe habit forming. Some of those others will make you sick. I do want to say a word or two about this, sort of off the record, but not really, because it's very much a part of my story and perhaps some of yours, is I feel very strongly about this phenomenon of cross-addiction and cross-tolerance. And I know I am a total addict. And I feel like other people that have the same disease that I do are also. I know that any time that I take any type of mood-altering or mind-changing drug, it's only a matter of time till I go back to my drug of choice. And it's amazing to me how some people will say, well, my drug of choice was alcohol, therefore I can smoke a little dope. Or if I did this, I can do that. Or if I took cocaine, I can drink a little beer. And it just doesn't work, friends. It just doesn't work. So I know that if any time I should ever decide to go back to taking drugs, I'm not going to fool around with any Mellaril or Elavil or Xanax or Cerax or Librium or Valium or morphine or heroin or cocaine or marijuana. I'm just going to go to my drug of choice. My drug of choice, my friends, is Scotch whiskey. And I say it with reverence. That's the finest drug that there ever was. Did everything for me I ever wanted it to, and would again probably for about 5 minutes. But it also took everything away from me. But anyhow, I took all these drugs and I drank, and some interesting things happened. Well, one I'll share with you. I guess we've got a little time. And I got back to work and was real active, and they called me one night to come down to the hospital. They had a real bad emergency. Now, I wasn't on call, and this was not my patient. But they needed somebody of my skill and my training, and they called me up and said, would you come down and help us? And I said, yes, I would. So I got up in the middle of the night, and I threw on my clothes and I got in my car and I raced down the expressway, ego running wild. I'm a doctor in emergency, you see. And I pull into the emergency room, and I leave the lights on, the motor running, the car door is open, and I went into the emergency room, some sort of a combination of Walter Mitty and Superman. Have no fear, Conway is here. Well, I went in and I took charge of the case, and the case went well. You know, it's amazing our ability to perform. We're usually the best there is anyhow, and particularly in our trained skills, we're better than anybody else. The performance is fine. The case went real well. And I would have been all right if I kept my mouth shut. No practicing alcoholic's going to keep his mouth shut. So I had to tell them how lucky they were to have me down there, and I did. Well, the next morning I came back to the hospital fully expecting a hero's welcome, and I didn't get that. And what I noticed, there were people standing around on the side, and they were whispering to each other. They were whispering to each other, and they were looking at me. You all have all seen these people, the one with the thin little lips and the beady eyes. They're gossipers, and they were looking at me, and they were talking, and as one of my friends, they were looking sort of slaunch-eyed at me. Whenever they're doing that, they're talking about you, and you know they're talking. You can feel it right here. And, well, they were talking about me, and I got called down to the administrator's office, told in no uncertain terms not to ever come back to that hospital under the influence. Well, I'd sobered up enough to where I knew to keep my mouth shut. I didn't say anything. I went out and I got in my car, and I was driving on over to the office, and I got to thinking about this. I really appreciate what Ken said last night. Thinking is the most dangerous thing an alcoholic can do. But as I got to thinking about this, I just got filled up with righteous indignation. Here I went down to the hospital in the middle of the night, and I saved that woman's life. And they're talking about those 2 or 3 little drinks I had. Well, I reached up under the seat. And I got that bottle of hot vodka. If there are any of you that have not experienced the thrill of drinking hot vodka, I don't remember it. That sends chills up my... I don't recommend it. That sends chills up my spine right now. But it does have authority. If you ever get one of those to stay down, you're in control the rest of the day. The insanity of it all was I didn't think I had done anything wrong. They didn't appreciate me. Well, as it often happens to us alcoholics, I kept getting promoted. I kept getting elevated, given more responsibility. My father was giving me more responsibility. And at the hospital, they even put me on the executive committee of the whole hospital. And this was a real important job, especially for anybody as young as I was. Well, they put me on the executive committee, and they asked me to come to the executive committee meeting, and I remember it real well. And it was on a Wednesday morning, and it was right before Christmas in December, and it was very cold in Atlanta. So I got up early that morning, and I got dressed. I put on a suit, an overcoat, a hat, muffler, gloves, and dark glasses. This was before daylight. And it was also before shades was cool. And I went down to that meeting. Now, these are my peers. This is the head of medicine, the head of surgery, the hospital administrator, the head nun. It was a Catholic hospital, the head nurse, and all the people, the decision makers in the hospital were all in there. And I went into that room. They were all sitting around those little fold-up chairs, you know, in a circle, and there was one seat left over there. And I don't know what they were doing before I got there. But as soon as I got there, it all stopped. And that was the loudest silence I've ever heard in my life. Well, I went over to sit down. They all carried me with their eyes, you know, dressed exactly as I described. And they didn't do anything except stare at me. Now, I knew they were looking at me, and I didn't know what to do, so I passed out. Now, this really shook them up, you know. They knew I had this trouble with my heart. They said, "Oh, my Lord, he's dead." And one big old fella had me up in his arms, and they were pulling my collar loose and taking my tie off and putting oxygen over my nose, and they were knocking those chairs around, and bells were ringing and sirens were blowing, and I was coming in and out of consciousness saying, "Please let it be a dream. Please let it be a dream." But it wasn't a dream, and when I woke up, they had me in an oxygen tent, and they had something hooked up to everything you can hook up something to. Woo. And then the doctors came in, the nurses, and they listened to the heart, and they ran the heart tracings, and then they frowned. There wasn't anything wrong with the heart. I was a medical mystery. I solved the mystery for him. I went into the DTs. Oh, I heard things, saw things, and I was running up and down the corridor in that little gown they give you, you know, that doesn't quite. And it was me and the nurses and the orderlies and reindeers and Santa Claus and elves and that. You know how those things go. Some of it was real, some of it wasn't. And I couldn't sort it out too well. I woke up the next morning, though, and I knew that it was Christmas, so I started getting my clothes together to go home. And the nurse said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm going to go home, be with my children for Christmas." She said, "You can't do that." I said, "Yes, I can. This is a hospital and not a jail, and you can't keep me here." Well, they did the smartest thing that they could have done. In fact, the only intelligent thing, that whole hospitalization. They called my father. They said, "You got to come get it." Incidentally, my father was chief of staff at the hospital at this time. Said, "You got to come get him. We can't do anything with him. He's dangerous. He's disturbing the hospital." So on Christmas Day, my father came to take me to the local drunk hospital. Now, I remember entering this hospital, but I never remember leaving. Sometimes I reflect back on how he must have felt that day, taking his only son that he loved so much. But when I entered that hospital, and I use the term lightly, they did all the wrong things that you can do. They gave me more and more drugs. And this is where I lost my mind. I don't remember much about what happened there at all. The things I do remember, none of them were pleasant. I remember being stripped. I remember being held. I remember being manhandled. I remember being put on a big table with leather belts all across me and cuffed to the side of the table and locked in a room, and the room with no doorknob on the inside and a little peephole that every now and then somebody would come by and look at you. I remember being placed in the straitjacket. I remember the screams. I remember the pain in the back after the convulsions. One night the convulsions were so severe they called the nurse in charge and said, the nurse in charge called the doctor and said, "What must we do? We can't stop the convulsions." The reply was, "Let him die. He's a hopeless alcoholic. Let him die." That's not as calloused as it sounds, because they didn't know what to do for me. I remember the screams. There are even times now I wake up in the middle of the night. And may I never forget it. May I never forget it. Thank God we've got hospitals now. We have treatment centers that not only provide the proper medical care, but will follow the basic principles of the program that we are here today about, and will treat us with dignity. We are not second-class citizens. We have a disease. The disease is known as alcoholism, and we deserve good medical care. I don't remember a whole lot else about what happened there. I finally left, and when I did, I went back down. I had two friends took me down to St. Simon's Island to stay with my sister. They had to. My mind was so clouded, so confused, in the mocha state, I was obtunded with the drugs that they had given me. I couldn't have even found my own way home. They took me down to St. Simon's Island, and it was in the dead of winter, and I didn't drink and I didn't take any drugs, but I would get out and I would walk. And I would walk along the little sandy roads, and I would walk along the beach. And something was slowly beginning to happen inside of me as the drugs began to clear from my head. And I began to think, but it really wasn't positive thought as much as it was a very strong, powerful feeling. As I walked along the shore, I became aware of the power of the universe. Think the next time by any great body of water like this or any other, but especially when you walk along the shore, when you hear the mighty ocean roar, when you feel the pull, the sway of the tide, when you see the birds in flight or the fishes in the sea or even the little fiddler crabs as they scurry through the marsh. These things didn't just happen. As I sat underneath the great oak tree, I experienced a feeling of peace that I don't think that I had ever known before. The best way that I can describe it is the absence of fear. I wasn't afraid. Fear is one great common denominator of all alcoholics. I've never known an alcoholic yet that wasn't afraid. But as long as I was there, as long as I was sitting underneath that great tree, I felt safe. I felt secure, as I must have felt when my mother held me in her arms. I stayed down there for a little while longer, and I came back to go to work. You know, I didn't know if I'd have a job or not. It's not much secret what's wrong with you when you go into the DTs. Then I went into the hospital, and they called a special meeting to talk to me, and it was in the trustees' room, and I went to the meeting down there, and I didn't know what I'd do. I didn't know what I'd say, and I didn't have to do or say anything. They did it all. They'd been covering up for me for a long time anyhow. And this was sort of how it went when I went in there. Well, we know you've been working these long and hard hours. We know you've had this trouble with your heart. We know that you've been taking this medication, but you're a very valuable member of this staff. We want you to come back and work with us, but you've got to keep it under control. Keep it under control. At this particular point in time, I was a hopeless addict to the drug alcohol. I couldn't go over 2 hours at a time without taking a drink. Because when I had come back, I'd started drinking and I'd started taking drugs again. But I never, ever took any drug. Alcohol is my drug. The only reason, and I took lots of other drugs. I never took them except for two reasons. One, to keep my hands from shaking, and the fact that you couldn't smell them. I never found a drug that would do for me what alcohol would do. But anyhow, I was drinking. I was so dependent. I couldn't go over 2 hours without taking a drink, and this was round-the-clock drinking. This was the horror part of alcoholism, with the running and the hiding and the lying and the cheating, the living in fear, that feeling of doom and impending disaster. The next step that you take, you're going to fall off the cliff. Or the telephone rings and panic sets in. Who is it? They've caught up with you. You wake up in the morning, you lie there in the bed, and you know that the shakes and the sweats are going to come. And you know it's only one thing will stop it, and you know that that's a drink, and you know that you've got to have it. Keep it under control. I wasn't drinking because I wanted to. I was drinking because I had to. Of course, I went back down to the hospital. They stopped me. They sent me home. Next day, and the hand-delivered letter came. Don't ever come back to this hospital. I was fired, publicly humiliated, disgraced. Once again, I went back down to St. Simon's Island. I didn't ever drink and drug when I was down there. And I'm not really sure why. I certainly had every reason to, I guess. But I went back down there this time, and it's where I was first introduced to AA. My sister called him up and said that, called him up and asked, and two fellows came out to the house to talk to me and said they were having a meeting that night, and would I come to it? And I said, yes, and I would. And then I had to drink. And I went to that meeting that night just as high as a Georgia pine. Thank goodness nobody there stopped me and sent me away and said, Alcoholics Anonymous is just for sober alcoholics. If I'd been rejected, if I'd been refused at that time, I would not be alive today. I could not have taken another rejection at that time. Well, I went into the meeting and some fella got up and talked. Later on I met him, but I don't remember much about it that night. And after the meet was over, they gave out some. Down south, we use some little symbolic poker chips, which are symbols of your periods of sobriety. And you go from the white chip, and the red chip, and the yellow chip, and the green chip, and the blue chip as token and symbols of your progress on the road to sobriety. And the blue chip, of course, signifying a year. Well, after the meeting was over, they gave out these poker chips, and several people took one. Well, I took one too. I would have taken one of each color if I thought it would have done any good. Well, after the meeting was over, I went home and I woke my sister up and I showed her that poker chip, a white poker chip with AA on the surface. Knowing full good and well, as soon as I left the room, they called back to Atlanta, our problems are solved. He's joined AA. I didn't join AA. I used AA. I went to AA for all the wrong reasons you can go. I went to AA to get them off my back. You see, they were talking about what they were going to do with me, and they meant for keeps. But here was my ticket. Well, I didn't drink anymore and I didn't drug. I went to a few more meetings, but the main thing that was happening to me was the stillness and the solitude and the walks by the water, standing on the bridge and watching the boat go out, and becoming aware of the infinite power of God. Oh, how I would have embraced that oak tree and said, give me some of your strength. I knew I didn't want to drink anymore, but I didn't know if I could live. I stayed down there a little while longer. I went to a few meetings. I came back to Atlanta. I continued to go to some meetings. Several people tried to help me. I wouldn't let you help me. I wouldn't let you see how miserable and how rotten it was inside. No, I don't need you. All your phony handshakes and slogans and easy does it's. I don't need you. Well, I didn't really bother anybody much. My eyes crossed sometimes, and I wobbled a little bit, but of course I didn't get any better. Finally, one night it was real bad, and this man came out to the house to talk to me, and he's a real big guy. He's my sponsor, and he still is my sponsor, and I can't say enough about sponsorship. I believe very strongly in it. But he came out to that house that night to talk to me, and he started taking my inventory, and we talked about all kinds of things that night. And he told me what I was doing wrong, and this is a program of honesty and so forth and so on. And I resented this. He's 6 feet 4 inches tall, 250 pounds. He's a marathon runner and a finger pointer. And I resented this, and I rose up all 5 feet, and I said, now listen here, you don't have any right to come in my house and talk to me this way. Here I am, a man with 2 college degrees, 2 cars in a carport, bank account in 2 different banks, an upstanding citizen and member of this community. He said, you remember that when the sheriff comes out here to get you. Well, a little knowledge is a dangerous thing, because I said, you don't have any right to come out here and talk to me. I didn't ask for your help. We can never, ever really help anyone unless they want our help. But I didn't say don't try. But he hung his head and he was walking to the door and he said, he's right. And immediately I realized I had the advantage in this situation. I was just like a little feisty dog, I'd nip him every time he stopped. And I backed him up into a corner of the kitchen there and I said, why do you do this? Do you do this because you hate me? And he looked at me and paused for a minute and he said, no, Conway, it's because I love you. Here's a 6.5-foot giant standing there in my kitchen telling me that he loves me. I wish that I could say that I stopped drinking at that time. I didn't. It was 2 days later. 2 days later, I went into the living room of the house. I was all alone. My family had all gone. They had to leave. They had to leave for their own safety and for their own sanity. And of course I believe alcoholism is a total family illness and that everybody in the family not only gets as sick, but deserves and needs to be in recovery, such as we are. But they had all gone, and I was there by myself. And I was in the depths of despair and depression, and I didn't want to live any longer. I didn't want to live. I didn't want to drink, but I didn't know how not to drink. And I couldn't stand to hurt my children any more than I had. So I went into the living room of the house. I had a gun. And I didn't plan to come out of that room. Then God showed me how much He loved me. My brain became as capable and clear of sane, sound, and orderly thought as it has ever been before or since. It was as if the clouds had been pulled aside, and I was able to see myself as I really was. All the false pride, the ego, the arrogance was completely removed. And this enabled me to completely surrender and turn my will and my life over to the care of God as best that I could at that time. I fell on my knees and I said, God, help me. God, help me. Prayer? Oh, prayer was nothing new to me. I lived a life of prayer. I prayed all day, all the time. God, get me out of this, and I promise I won't do that anymore. Bargains and pleadings and promises. No. A simple but a sincere cry for help. God, help me. Of course the cry was heard. And then I remembered this doctor that I'd heard about, lived down in South Georgia, about 200 miles away, and I went down and I lived with him in his home. But there, in addition to him, there were people just like you. And you introduced me to unconditional love. You took me into your hearts and you took me into your homes. You put your arms around me and you loved me. You knew that I was lonely and you knew that I was afraid. You didn't ask me where I had come from or what I had done or who I was. You loved me just as I was, just as I think God loves each and every one of us now. Not as what we would like to be, but just as we are at this moment. Wasn't all a bed of roses, though. That doctor believed in withdrawing, and I withdrew with just withdrawing. Second day I was there, he came in my room. He said, we're going to a meeting tonight. And I said, Dr. John, I can't even put on my pants. Well, we went to a meeting that night. And there I picked up the white chip that enabled me to go on to the blue chip that I have today. And many other wonderful things happened down there. Too many to go into, but I will share this with you. On next to the last day that I was there, I was all alone, and I went to, I was looking out. I think I've lived most of my life alone. I was looking out a pair of French doors into the warm November sunlight, and I became aware of the sun as it came through a little grove of pine trees, and then these beams of light came through the panes on those French glass doors. And as the beams of light came through and they hit my body, I was suddenly engulfed with a feeling of warmth. And accompanying that was the instant knowledge that at that moment I was in the presence of God. And that as long as I remained so, I would never ever have to take a drink or a drug again. I was free. My compulsion, my obsession was completely removed. That was November the 13th, 1966, my friends. And from that moment until now, I have never ever wanted a drug, nor have I ever given myself a drug. I've had surgery, so I have had medicine since that time. And it's been no problem. I take absolutely no credit for my sobriety. Purely a gift from God. Well, then I left and I came back and I really joined AA this time. And I did all the things that you told me to do. I went to the meetings early and I helped set up the chairs and I emptied the ashtrays and I made the coffee and then I stayed around after it was over. I basically am a very shy person, so I didn't talk it was over a year before I said anything any more than my name. That probably was a good thing because my brain was so scrambled at that time anyhow. But then after a while, I got back to work. first working in the office with my father. Then I got back on the hospital staff. And long about this time, though, I started seeing and treating alcoholics, too. And it was interesting that we had a rather large practice, but they would call up and I would see alcoholics. And so every now and then somebody would call up and say, I want to come in and see Dr. Hunter. And the nurse or receptionist would say, which one? And they'd say the alcoholic. Well, I don't have any anonymity, and that's my choice. And that's the way that I live my life. Everybody knew me when I was the drunk Dr. Hunter. I'm certainly not sorry for them to know me as the sober Dr. Hunter. Well, anyhow, that's how I got involved in this. And interestingly enough, back as far as the hospital is concerned, it was within a year's time I was back a member of that executive committee that I passed out in that time. Later on, I was chairman of the board of trustees of the largest medical surgical hospital in the city, and very busy and very active, and not only in my trained specialty, but then also working in the field of chemical dependency. And it was I started a couple of hospitals, and we started treatment in the South. And people used to come to me because in the fellowship it was known that I was a recovered alcoholic, and also in the medical community it was known that I was a recovered doctor. And both of these were just fine, and that's the way I like it, and that's the way that it still is. And as our hospitals were very successful. Later on, I was corporate medical director of one of the largest hospital chains that there is. And I've done conferences and seminars and workshops literally all over the world, both of a scientific nature, but the thing that I like to do the most, and usually when they ask me to speak at medical societies and meetings of this nature, they get a short version of what you're hearing today, because that's the one that they remember. But anyhow, I became very busy and very active. I was gone from home most of the time. I remember coming home late one Sunday afternoon, and my children were out in the yard playing catch. And I went out to talk to them, and I changed clothes, and I was going to a meeting. And they stopped their game, and they looked up at me, and they said, "Dad, where are you going?" I knew what they were thinking. Why don't you come out and play ball with us? We haven't seen you for a while. Come on out and be with us. Come share with us for a while, Dad. They didn't say that. They said, "Have a good time, Dad. Going to a meeting, Dad. I love you. See you in the morning, Dad." I got in my car and I drove on over to the meeting. But I had to stop because I realized what these children were telling me. These are the children that I had abused. These are the children that cried all night. These are the children, each one had that deep, dark secret inside. They couldn't tell you what happened in their house last night. These are the children that wouldn't have their friends come to the house. These are the children that cried all night. Have a good time, Dad. I love you, Dad. I'll see you in the morning, Dad. Why? He's going to an AA meeting, and they've got a daddy now. They've got a daddy they not only love, they always loved me, but now they're proud of me. Never will forget. One day, I was standing in that same room, and I saw the school bus stop in front of the house, and saw my little girl jump down the steps. Now, she's about 7 years old and had a long blonde ponytail, and she's a real spunky little girl. She's a natural athlete. And, well, she never will be Miss America, but she is to me, you know. And she's a real happy child and never cries. But you know if it's yours, you can tell if something's wrong even at a distance. And I looked, and I could see that something was wrong. And then I looked closer, and I saw the little tears running down her face. And then I saw the wet blue spots on the little blue pinafore that she had on. And she ran up the hill and into the house, and she saw me, and she dropped her books, and she sobbed. I comforted her as best that I could. And finally I said, "Susan, what's wrong?" And she looked up at me with those big blue eyes and said, "Daddy, they called you a drunk all the way home on the school bus. She wrote me a letter not too long ago describing some things she was going through, and she started off that letter to the dearest dad in the world. She says, I am so very proud that you're my father. And I love you, Susan. Do you know what that means to me? The difference from the look in those eyes. I'm so proud that you're my father. But for the grace of God. Well, I continued to work, and Susan used to take care of me for a while. I lived alone, and she would come over and take care of the house, and we'd have this little thing going on, and I would go off somewhere to make a talk or something, or going to be gone, and she'd come up, and she doesn't mince words too much, and she'd put arms around me, and she'd say, do a good one, Dad, and thank him for giving me back my father. Well, I'm still doing, and I think she still likes to take care of me, but she doesn't anymore. And as I say, I was very busy and very active, and I guess I'd accomplished just about all the things that there was that I had set out to do. But little known to me, I was alone. And this happens at times, even though I was surrounded by people most of the time. I was alone. I was lonely. If you'd asked me, I would have denied it. But once again, God showed me just how much He loved me. On Sunday morning, 7 years ago, this next week, at a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous on St. Simon's Island, I went into a large auditorium, not too much unlike this one, except it was a little more spiritual. And I remember seeing the sun coming through the trees and coming over the Frederica River, and it cast a radiant glow around a beautiful flower. And that flower, my friends, is my wife Charlotte.
Sorry to interrupt your viewing. Taper Dave here. Just wanted to take a second to ask you to like and subscribe to my channel. Let me know if you like what you're listening. I've got some very good talks here, and this one's a great one. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Tell me what you think.
And almost from that moment, we've not been apart. Well, I'll have to tell you a little bit about that. Well, I did get to meet her, and we talked. And then she left, and the meeting was over. And I didn't know her name. It took me 2.5 months to find her again. And then 2 months later, we were married. And so from that moment on, it's been a whole new dimension into my life. And we left Atlanta, and I semi-retired, and I just do consulting work now. And we moved down to this island where we had a home, and we lived there, and we have the finest and the best AA in the world down there in our groups. And all right, come see. Contempt prior to investigation. And we meet in the little tabby house down there, and it's one. Tonight's our meeting. I won't get home for it tonight. And we have men's meeting and women's meetings and all of these things, and it's just great. And we walk hand in hand as we share our experiences in the road of happy destiny together, and we do some wonderful things. And you know, golly, if somebody comes to me and said, is there any way in this world that you could appreciate life more than you do? And I said, no, I don't think so. And God showed me once again. He wasn't through with me. A little over a year ago, I experienced an extreme fatigue and weakness that I couldn't explain. I did everything in the world to try to make it better. I would go on walks, and I would proper nutrition and all of this sort of thing, and rest. But I literally had no strength at all. So finally, the last resort, I went to see a doctor. When a doctor goes to see a doctor, my friends, it's serious. And I found out that I had a major coronary occlusion. And they said this was the story. I had over 95% occlusion of all the blood vessels of the heart. And that I had to have surgery, and they were going to do it the next day. I said, no, you aren't. I'm not ready. So I left the hospital, and we went and we prayed and we cried, and the word got out from the hospital and from all over the country. Telegrams, letters, flowers from the members of the fellowship kept pouring in. And this enabled us, Charlotte and I, to take the third step once again. Because they told me that the surgery was of such a serious nature that there was no guarantee, and the percentages were not that great that I would survive the surgery. And I had to accept this. And also she had to accept living a life without me. And we did this. We turned our will and our life over the care of God. And from that moment on, from then, the sense of relief and understanding and of joy and of fulfillment and of protection was just unbelievable. I called up. We went into the hospital 2 days later for the surgery. And another little sidelight on that. The operative surgeon, I did not know. And a real good friend of mine, who's a cardiologist there, came to go down to the operating room with me. I had not met the operative surgeon. I knew the cardiologist, but not the operative surgeon. And he went down to the operating with me that morning, and I guess I was sort of goofy from what they'd given me. I didn't make too much sense. But and I didn't know this until afterwards. But he stayed there in the observation room and was on hand the whole time. The operative surgeon, the anesthesiologist, the first assistant, and the man running the heart and lung machine were all recovered members of Alcoholics Anonymous. Oh, my friends, what can I say? Oh, ye of little faith, or the doubting Thomases that I've been all along the line. And God just keeps showing me the miracles in this wonderful world and the things of joy that He has planned for me. And this weekend is certainly something that will go down in my memory book as one of the most enjoyable experiences of my life. Being surrounded with all the love and the caring and the sharing of this wonderful group of wonderful, beautiful faces, and most of you, though, I don't know. But yet then we do know each other because we all speak the language of the heart. And I look into your faces and I look into your eyes, and it's such a wonderful feeling. You know, I love flowers. But the flowers that grow in the field, they will soon wither and die. But the flowers that grow in the heart, they will live forever. Our faces, my friends, you people are the living flowers of the world. And as you look into somebody's eyes and look and you see what you see the love of the God that lives within. The love of one alcoholic sharing with another alcoholic. Love is the greatest healing power that there has ever been. Love conquers all. My life, my love, my sobriety is God's gift to me. What I do with my life, what you do with your life, is your gift back to God. Every morning that I wake up now, it's a whole new dimension of this one day at a time. And it's true for everybody. Today is my day. Many of you in here, like me, probably had more than a few chances where you could have met death. Almost all of us in here had somewhere along the line survived. We're all survivors. Every morning when I wake up, I have a choice. Not whether I'll drink or drug. Of course that's true. And there was a time when I didn't have that choice. But I can choose so many other things. The people I'm going to be with. And I choose to be with winners. I don't want to be around any negative people anymore. And I choose to be with sober people. And I choose to be with happy, successful people. And we're all successful. Everybody in this room here this morning is a winner. You're a room full of winners. And I get so fed up with those folks that say it can't be done. I feel like telling them, well, let's get out of the way of the ones of us that are going to do it. I just love that slogan that they've got out where it says, go for it. Go for it. That's the way I live my life. I'm going for it. I'm going for what? I'm going for all the joy, all the happiness, all the wonderful things, all of you wonderful people that I haven't met yet. I'm going for it because I'm going to enjoy every moment that I have left in this life. And I want you to do the same thing too. But you see, I have a choice. I can even choose whether I'm going to be happy or whether I'm going to be sad. And I choose to be happy. When I stop and think on this and I look back and I say, thank God for this difference in me that led me to the disease of alcoholism, to drug addiction, to you wonderful people in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, because without that, I wouldn't be what I am today. I'm a happy alcoholic. I'm a successful alcoholic. I'm a grateful alcoholic. Because I know that my happiness and my success depends directly on my gratitude and knowledge that it comes from the one great source, the one great God of my understanding, as it does to you. I want to thank you for letting me come and share with you this morning and be with you and take part in this meeting. And I want to ask this God to hold you ever so gently in the palms of His hand, where your name is already written. And may He take you and bless you and keep you. And to this God of mine I say, how great thou art. Thank you.
I think we got a great talk going on here. Thanks for watching the channel. Taper Dave here. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst and one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, oop, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right. But I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.